Imagine the familiar image of a royal princess surrounded by centuries-old protocol and European tradition. Now imagine that same princess walking into a place no one expected, a land filled with rhythm, color, and a pulse older than monarchy itself. But here's the truth that rewrites the story entirely. Princess Leonor's journey across Africa didn't just change the people she met. It changed her, completely. And the deeper you go into this journey, the more you realize that everything you thought you knew about her wasn't the whole picture at all. Princess Leonor of Spain has always carried the weight of her future crown with grace, but there are moments in a young royal's life that challenge the very foundation they stand on. This journey across Africa wasn't a symbolic tour, nor a carefully choreographed royal appearance. It became something far more intimate, far more revealing, and far more transformative than anyone within the royal circles anticipated. It began quietly, almost secretly, with Leonor expressing a wish that surprised even her own family. She wanted to explore Africa not from the polished windows of a royal convoy, but through the heartbeat of the continent itself. She wanted to listen, learn, observe, understand. She wanted to step into places where the meaning of heritage is felt in the soil, where culture is not preserved in museums but lived in the laughter of children, the craftsmanship of elders, and the wisdom of community. And the moment she set foot on the warm, sun-kissed ground, she knew she had crossed a threshold she could not step back from. Her first encounter was in a small coastal community where tradition moves to the rhythm of the tides. Women worked in groups, their hands weaving patterns into baskets and cloth, each thread forming a story passed from mother to daughter for generations. Leonor watched with a sense of awe she struggled to hide. Royal life had taught her about responsibility, diplomacy, discipline. But here she learned something different: heritage that breathes, heritage that sings. As she sat with the women, they placed a woven cloth in her hands. The pattern was ancient, older than the Spanish crown itself. The women explained that the cloth represented unity, perseverance, and the strength of womanhood. Leonor's fingers traced the patterns, and in their curves and colors she sensed something deeply familiar and yet profoundly new. She asked questions, listened intently, and slowly began to understand the layers of meaning behind every design. What she didn't expect was how the women looked at her, not as a royal visitor, but as a young woman searching for understanding. And that simple shift changed everything for her. But that was only the beginning. The deeper she traveled into Africa's vast and diverse cultural landscapes, the more she encountered traditions that connected deeply with her own journey toward becoming a future queen. In the highlands, she met elders who explained the role of guardianship, the sacred responsibility of leadership, and the importance of humility. They spoke not as politicians or scholars, but as protectors of memory. Their words carved new reflections inside her, raising questions she had never dared to ask so openly. What does it truly mean to lead? What does it truly mean to serve? And how does a young woman find her voice in a world built on centuries of expectations? Each answer led to more questions, each moment opening a new door she hadn't realized existed. And Leonor wasn't afraid to step through each one. She felt herself changing, quietly, deeply, invisibly, but unmistakably. In the savanna regions, she witnessed ceremonies that honor ancestors, dances that recount victories and losses, and songs that carry the weight of history across time. One evening, as the sun settled low on the horizon, painting the sky with gold and fire, she was invited to sit by a circle of storytellers. Their words rose like living flames, dancing through the dusk as they described how each generation holds the responsibility of protecting the next. Leonor listened, mesmerized. They spoke of leadership not as power but as stewardship. They spoke of the courage required to stand firmly while lifting others. And through their voices, she found echoes of her own destiny reflected in entirely new forms. The curiosity loop pulled her deeper. If leadership looked so different here, what did that mean for her own future? How could traditions from worlds apart speak with such clarity about the path she was preparing to walk? She traveled next through regions rich with ancient kingdoms whose histories rival European monarchies in grandeur and sophistication. Here she discovered a new dimension of royal heritage, one shaped by resilience, adaptation, and cultural memory. She visited palaces where artifacts glimmered under soft light, where carved doors told stories of rulers who defended their people, where murals depicted queens whose strength shaped the identity of entire nations. As she walked through those halls, she felt an unexpected kinship, a sense that her own role in the modern world was part of a much larger human story of stewardship, guidance, and responsibility. One artifact in particular stopped her in her tracks, a ceremonial staff carried by a legendary queen known for uniting divided communities. The guide explained that the staff symbolized truth, justice, and balance, three principles that shaped her reign. Leonor stared at it for a long moment, feeling its symbolism press gently but firmly into her thoughts. She wondered what symbols would define her own legacy one day. What principles would she hold tightly to when the weight of the crown finally settled onto her shoulders? That question lingered with her long after she left the palace. And yet, the journey wasn't only historical or ceremonial. Africa's living culture, the food, the music, the informal gatherings at sunset, showed her what joy rooted in community truly looked like. She found herself laughing more freely than she had in a long time. She tasted dishes that burst with unfamiliar spices and warmth. She danced, shy at first, but then genuinely, alongside people who welcomed her without hesitation. These were not diplomatic moments. They were human ones, and they reminded her that leadership is not only about duty, it is also about connection. But with each new experience came another curiosity. How would this journey change the way she approached her royal future? What would she take with her? And more importantly, what would she leave behind? As Leonor continued traveling, she found herself drawn to youth-led cultural movements, artists, musicians, innovators, dancers, young people redefining identity while honoring tradition. Their energy inspired her. They showed her how culture isn't static. It grows, shifts, bends with time, yet remains rooted in something ancestral and enduring. She saw in them reflections of her own generation, young, hopeful, navigating a world shaped by change and tradition in equal measure. In a vibrant urban arts center, Leonor met a group of young creators producing films about their communities. They discussed themes of identity, heritage, and the pressure of expectations, concepts that hit close to home for her in ways she never expected. When they asked her how she balanced her future role with her own personal dreams, she paused. It was a question she often asked herself but rarely answered aloud. She spoke softly, explaining that she was still learning, still growing, and still trying to shape her path with honesty. They nodded, not out of politeness, but understanding. And in that moment, she no longer felt like a princess standing apart from the world. She felt like a young woman standing in the center of it. One of the most emotional moments of her journey came during a visit to a cultural school where children learned traditional music and dance. The children greeted her with wide eyes and excited smiles. Some had never seen a European royal before, and yet they didn't treat her with distance. One little girl placed a handmade bracelet on her wrist, explaining that it symbolized friendship and courage. Leonor felt her eyes sting as she hugged the child gently, overwhelmed by the sincerity of the gesture. It was a simple moment, but it pierced through every layer of formality she was used to. It reminded her that influence means nothing without empathy, and that empathy means little without action. But perhaps the most transformative experience awaited her in a remote village where the community had preserved centuries-old rituals that honor the transition from youth to adulthood. The elders invited her to observe a ceremony marking this passage, a ceremony rich with symbolism, guiding young people toward maturity and purpose. As she watched, she felt her heart swell with emotions she struggled to name. She saw reflections of her own transition, not through ritual but through responsibility. For the first time, she realized that becoming a queen wasn't only about monarchy. It was about becoming a woman with clarity, strength, and grounding. As the ceremony ended, one of the elders approached her and placed a carved wooden pendant in her hand. He told her it represented wisdom earned through humility. He said that leadership begins not when one speaks, but when one listens. Leonor held the pendant tightly, feeling its weight, feeling the truth of his words sink into her like seeds waiting to bloom. By now, her journey had woven itself into her heart. Her reflections grew deeper, her questions became more precise. And the more she learned, the more she wanted to understand. What other wisdom lay hidden across the continent? What new perspective would influence her future as queen? What stories would she carry with her back to Spain, and which ones would change her forever? As she approached the final days of her journey, she found herself sitting beneath the vast African night sky, a sky so expansive it made the world feel endlessly ancient and endlessly young at the same time. She thought about the women who taught her the meaning of perseverance. She thought about the elders who showed her the soul of leadership. She thought about the children who gave her gifts made with love. She thought about the creators who taught her that identity is both inherited and reinvented. Every memory formed a mosaic she knew she would carry into her future reign. It wasn't simply a trip. It became a quiet transformation, a subtle but profound reshaping of her inner world. When Leonor finally prepared to return home, she felt something she hadn't expected, a new sense of grounding, as if her heart had grown roots in places far beyond the borders of Spain. She realized that leadership, real leadership, is born not in palaces but in connection. Not in tradition alone, but in understanding how different traditions weave together to form humanity's shared story. And that is the journey she brings back with her. A journey shaped by cultures rich with spirit and memory, by people who welcomed her with sincerity, by stories that taught her the meaning of purpose. A journey that transformed a princess into a future queen shaped not only by European royalty, but by the vast and beautiful tapestry of Africa. And now the question lingers, forming one final curiosity loop for every listener. How will Africa's culture shape the way Princess Leonor leads Spain in the years to come? The answer lies ahead, waiting in the next chapter of her life. But one thing is certain. She will not lead the same way she would have before this journey. She will lead with broader vision, deeper empathy, and a heart strengthened by the wisdom of a continent that changed her forever.